Hello NEET aspirants, welcome back to part 2 of body fluids and circulation. Before starting the second part, I would like to add some additional points to the previous video. As you know that heart pumps out oxygenated blood which will be carried by the artery, and the body will utilize this oxygenated blood, and through the veins deoxygenated blood will be carried back into the heart. So at the level of capillaries, this oxygen utilization will takes place. As you know that as the blood passes from the arteries up to the capillaries, along with the water and water soluble substance, oxygen and nutrients also pass into this space where the water and water soluble substances are present. From here only the cells utilize it. So this is a space between the capillary and the cells. This is the medium of transport from here to here and from here to here. But what will happen to this fluid? This will be drained by the lymphatics, and from here it will be drained back to the vein. So what is this lymphatics? As you can see here, this is from the heart. This is an imaginary diagram, okay? This from the heart, it is carried by the artery. The blood is carried by the artery, and at this level of capillaries, assume that this whitish area, whatever you can see, this is a place where this water and water soluble substances are present. From here, where does it go? It goes into a lymphatics. Lymphatics is a specialized network of vessels. It is not the same as blood vessels, not the artery, not the vein. It is a separate system of vessels where this lymph would be present, and from this lymphatics it will have connection with the veins, and from there it will connect to the vein. So let's start with the part of this chapter. There are two patterns of circulation. One is open, another one is closed. So open is mainly seen in arthropods and mollusks, whereas closed is seen in annelids and chordates. Human belongs to chordates. So what happens in this open type is, as you can see in this diagram, from the heart it is taken by the great vessels, okay, but eventually blood goes into an open space, okay. So the vessels are not connected here. It goes into an open space. That is what I have written here. From the heart it is goes into an open space. While in a closed type, you have a closed network of blood vessels. You can see it doesn't go into an open space. This is called as closed type. Moving ahead, all vertebrates has muscular chambered heart. But there are different types of heart depending on the chamber it possesses. For example, if there are different house, there will be different number of rooms. Similarly, there are different types of heart depending on the number of chamber it possesses. It can be 2-chambered, 3-chambered or 4-chambered. In 2-chambered heart, there is one atrium and one ventricle. It is mainly seen in fish. This is a fish where you can see one atrium and one ventricle which will pump out deoxygenated blood. It will enter here. These are called as gills, where oxygenation happens. So from here, oxygenated blood will be utilized by the body. After utilization, deoxygenated blood will enter back to this heart. There is a single pathway, okay, this cycle happening. So it is called as single circulation. Moving ahead, we have 3-chambered heart, especially seen in amphibians and reptiles, but not except crocodile, okay. So crocodile comes in 4-chambered heart. So here there are 2 atriums and 1 ventricle. So deoxygenated blood comes in the right side, oxygenated blood comes in the left side. But eventually in the ventricles there will be mixing of the blood, okay. So it is called as incomplete double circulation. There is a separate pathway, okay, initially for deoxygenated and oxygenated blood, but eventually it mixes. So it is called as incomplete double circulation. Moving ahead, you have 4-chambered heart where there is a separate pathway for deoxygenated blood on the right side and oxygenated blood on the left side, okay. So this is called as complete double circulation, or in general double circulation, mainly seen in crocodile, birds and mammals. Let's now learn about human circulatory system, which is nothing but blood vascular system. Humans have 4-chambered heart, that is 2 atrium and 2 ventricles. And on the right side, this is the right side of the heart, this is the left side of the heart, but it is opposite to a hand direction. Because assume someone is sleeping on this page, then their hand will be right on this side and left on this side. You should assume someone is sleeping on your page. On the right side, always the deoxygenated blood comes, and on the left side, always the oxygenated blood comes. And Between the two atrium there is interatrial septum, and between the two ventricle there is interventricular septum. But the interatrial septum is bit thinner compared to interventricular septum. Now in between the atrium and ventricle also you have certain valve which opens and close, okay, on both right and left side. The valve which is present between the atrium and ventricle on the right side is called as tricuspid because it has 3 leaflets, while on the left side you have bicuspid valve because it has 2 leaflets. Now at the end of the ventricle, before it opens, you have valve which is called as semilunar valve. Now let's learn about the path. Usually at the right atrium, superior vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood from the upper part of the body, and inferior vena cava brings the deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body. Once it enters here, it goes through the pulmonary artery. Here the artery word doesn't match with the whether it is oxygenated or deoxygenated. Usually we assume that artery carries oxygenated blood, but only in the heart we have a misnomer that a pulmonary artery carries a deoxygenated blood. From here it will enter the lungs. From the lungs it will be oxygenated and taken back into the heart by pulmonary vein. Here also the name is misnomer. Now it will enter here and taken by the aorta to the body. Body will utilize it, and later again the deoxygenated blood will carried by the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava back into the heart. So these cycles continue, and heart is mesodermal in origin. And why these valves are present? These valves are present to prevent the backflow. Once it enters in one direction, that is forward direction, to avoid the backflow, you have valves at every level, from at the between atrium and ventricle, and at the end of ventricles also you have valves. Let's move further. In this diagram, as you can see that there are 3 leaflets. This is a tricuspid valve which will open and close. Similarly, this is a bicuspid valve because there are only 2 leaflets. Moving ahead, let's learn now about a specialized cardiac musculature that are nothing but nodal tissue. So what are this nodal tissue? This is nothing but SAN and AVN. SAN is sinoatrial node, whereas AVN is atrioventricular node. This SAN and AVN have a capacity to generate an action potential. What is this action potential? It is nothing but the electrical stimulus to the heart to start contracting. It is nothing but energy to contract. Okay, so SAN has the maximum capacity to generate the action potential, and it is equivalent to 70 to 75 times per minute. That helps for the rhythmic contractility of the heart. So normally heartbeat is around 70 to 75 times per minute. So it is equivalent to the action potential of SAN. So that means whenever SAN produces the action potential or electrical impulse or the energy, what will happen is heart contracts. That is equivalent to the heartbeat. Okay, AVN has also the potential, but it is less than that of AVN. So once SAN generates the action potential, soon after that AVN generates. Okay, so AVN generates the action potential. Now from the AVN there are atrioventricular bundle which will originate from the AVN, and it will cross the atrioventricular septum, okay, on the right side, and it will reach the top of the interventricular septum. At the interventricular septum, it will now divide into a right and left bundle, which is also called as bundle of His. Now it will reach down and at the end of the ventricles, it will give out small fibers which are called as Purkinje fibers. And this tissue are under self-control. It need not have any other external control. So it is called as auto-excitable, and hence it is called as myogenic. Let's now study about a cardiac cycle. So let's assume that both the atrium and the ventricle is in diastole. What is this diastole? Diastole means both are in a relaxed state. Both the atrium and ventricle are in the relaxed state. At this stage, the tricuspid and the bicuspid valves are open. It is relaxed. Okay, so what will happen? So blood on the right side, that is deoxygenated blood, will enter and get filled here. So as you can see, blood is getting filled here, and on the left side oxygenated blood will come because this is open, right? So oxygenated blood will come and gets filled here. After that, now SAN generates an action potential. So SAN produces the impulse. So what will happen is, by this stimulus, atrium will start contracting. So you can see here, this is a force of contraction here. So what will happen, this is the atrial systole. Systole is nothing but contraction. Okay, so now extra 30% of the blood will reach the ventricle by the atrial contraction. Whenever SAN generates the action potential, atrium will contract. You can see here, this arrow mark shows the contraction force. So whenever SAN generates action potential, atrium will contract. Now soon after this, A vein will produce. When A vein produces, this potential starts fading and this will be produced here, and it will spread through this fibers at the level of bundle of his. It will be spread all over the ventricle. So the similar thing I have written here. Once SAN produces, the potential here decreases. Once after the atrium contracts, AVN will produce the potential. Now it will spread through the AV bundle here, and the ventricle will start contracting now. So what will happen to the atrium? As I've told, SAN potential which it generated, now it will fade once AVN starts producing potential. So atrium will relax, but what will happen here? The potential is right now here. So a ventricle will contract. So once the ventricle contract, the pressure increases in the ventricle. So this will force open the semilunar valves. So here the semilunar valves will open. At the same time, the tricuspid and the bicuspid valve will close. So the similar thing I have written. So opening of semilunar valves and the closure of tricuspid valve. So once this semilunar valve opens, whatever the blood was filled here in this two ventricular chamber, now it will be pumped out from the heart. So how much volume would be pumped out? It is equivalent to 70 ml. That is equivalent to the stroke volume. Once this phase is completed, now the potential fades even here. So the ventricle will relax. Wherever the potential reach, there will be contraction. Once the potential goes off, it will relax. So the opposite will happen. Now there will be closure of this semilunar valves and opening of tricuspid and bicuspid valve. Again the filling will take place and the cycle continues. So in general, whenever one valve opens, the other valve will close, and wherever the potential reaches, it will contract. And you must know that whenever you hear a sound by the stethoscope, you can listen actually lub-dub sound. Lub sound is heard whenever this two valves closes. That is, closure of tricuspid and bicuspid corresponds to lub sound. And dub sound is heard whenever the semilunar valves close. So whenever you hear a sound of the heartbeat using a stethoscope, you listen the lub-dub sound, and it corresponds to the closure of tricuspid and bicuspid, that is nothing but the lub sound, and semilunar valves, that is dub sound. And this cycle, the cycle right from here, all this cycle continues. It is repeated in a cyclical manner, and this cyclical repetition of all this is called as cardiac cycle. And this cycle would be cyclically repeated, and it is called as cardiac cycle. One cardiac cycle is equivalent to one heartbeat, but as you know, heart beats 72 times per minute. And if you mathematically calculate it, that is, for 1 minute, that is equivalent to 60 seconds. There is 72 heartbeat or cardiac cycle. For one cardiac cycle, how much time does it take? It is equivalent to 0.8 seconds. And also, cardiac output can be calculated by multiplying stroke volume into heart rate. You know that heart rate is 72, and the stroke volume, as I have explained you, the amount of blood pumped by the ventricles, which is equivalent to 70 ml. That is, 70 into 72 roughly averages around 5 liters. And this cardiac output can be altered by increasing the heart rate. That is, in athletes, they have increased heart rate, so their cardiac output will be usually higher than a normal individual. Let's learn now about electrocardiograph. So electrocardiograph is a machine. As you can see in this diagram, this is a electrocardiograph. Okay, so you have something called as leads. These are nothing but which we are connecting to humans. So you have chest leads, okay, and you have leads which will be attached to both of your wrist, right and left, and on your left leg. So if you see, you are attaching the leads to right and left hands and the left leg. And once you attach this, you will get a graphical representation of the electrical activity which is happening in your heart. That will be obtained through this sheet. Okay, in this sheet you can see a graph like structure, that is nothing but this wave. Normally there will be P, Q, R, S, T kind of waves. So each wave corresponds to some part of cardiac cycle. So P wave corresponds to the atrial depolarization or atrial contraction. Okay. As I've explained you, whenever the atrium contracts, extra 30% of blood would go into ventricles. At this stage, T wave would be generated. And then QRS complex corresponds to ventricular contraction. This is that stage. When the ventricular contracts, the semilunar valves open and the blood will be pumped out. And which is this QRS complex is corresponding to ventricular contraction, which is also called as a depolarization. And once the contraction is completed, you know that the semilunar valves close and the tricuspid and bicuspid valve opens. So at this stage, T wave would be generated. That is nothing but ventricle will relax or repolarize. So QRS is the beginning of ventricular systole and T is the end of ventricular systole. The waves would be in the similar pattern. If there is any variation in the wave pattern, that means normally the heart is having certain pathology or some disease of the heart. And by measuring the QRS complex, you can measure the heart rate of that patient. Now talking about the blood vessels. You know that from the heart, the artery takes the oxygenated blood, and at the level of tissues, you will have capillaries, and from there deoxygenated blood will carried by the veins back into the heart. Now talking about the layers of the artery and vein. So you have tunica intima, tunica media and tunica externa. Tunica intima is made by squamous endothelium. Tunica media is made by layer of smooth muscles and elastic fiber. Tunica externa is made by fibrous connective tissue and collagen. But the tunica media of artery and veins are different. So in vein, the tunica media is relatively thinner. Now moving ahead with double circulation. There is two types of circulatory pattern, that is pulmonary and systemic. Both takes place simultaneously in the heart. It is not a different entity, but it takes place together. But while explaining, you are separating it. So pink side corresponds to pulmonary and the right side corresponds to systemic. In pulmonary, as you know that pulmonary circulation, you know that on the right side you have deoxygenated blood. It will be carried by the pulmonary artery into the lungs, and after oxygenation is taken back into the left atrium. This half pathway corresponds to pulmonary circulation. And once if it enters here, at the level of aorta, oxygenated blood will be carried, okay, along with the nutrients. So it will be carried by the artery, and this artery will become smaller arterioles, and at the level of tissue or the cells, you have the capillaries where it will utilize the oxygen and the nutrients, and deoxygenated blood will be carried back by the venules, veins and back into the right side. So this is called as systemic circulation. From upper part of the body, superior vena cava carries the deoxygenated blood, and from the lower part of the body, inferior vena cava will take the deoxygenated blood. But you must know that systemic and pulmonary circulation are not two different entities, means it doesn't take place separately but simultaneously. As you know that pulmonary circulation starts when the deoxygenated blood will enter the pulmonary artery and it will enter the lungs, from where oxygenation will happen and back into the left atrium. The pulmonary circulation is this much, and from there blood will be taken here. Through the aorta, the oxygenated blood will be taken to the body utilization, and from there deoxygenated blood back to here. So this takes place simultaneously. Okay, this is a complete cycle. So you know that blood is pumped by the heart, but even the heart needs the blood. So the blood supply of the heart is called coronary system or through coronary vessels. There is a specialized system called as hepatoportal system. That is, there is a specialized vascular connection between the intestine and the liver. So always the blood from the intestine is directed to the liver. Why? Because nutrients and the toxic substances, like certain, if you're consuming any drug, so everything will be taken first to the liver, where it will help for the metabolism, and then the blood will enter into systemic circulation. Now talking about regulation of cardiac activity, as I have told you that the nodal tissues, that is SAN, AVN, all these things have a self potential to generate the action potential. Hence it is called as intrinsic or myogenic. But even brain has control over the heart through autonomic nervous system. It contains two types of nerve fibers, that is sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic increases the heart rate, thereby the cardiac output. As you know that cardiac output is equal to stroke volume multiplied by heart rate. Whenever the heart rate increases, the cardiac output also increases. While the parasympathetic fibers decreases the heart rate and thereby the cardiac output. As you can see here, this is a kidney, and above each kidney there is one gland called as adrenal. Its center part is called as medulla. It produces hormone like medullary hormone, that is adrenaline and epinephrine, which increases the heart rate. In case scenarios like if you are feared or if you're anxious, your heart rate suddenly increases. This is because of increase in medullary hormone. Now talking about disorders of the heart, first one is hypertension. Normal blood pressure is 120 by 80 mmHg. mmHg means millimeters of mercury. So what is this 120 and what is this 80? Whenever the ventricle is in systole or ventricle is contracting, the pressure increases in the ventricle. Okay, that is called as systolic or pumping pressure, and whenever it is relaxed, the relaxed pressure is called as diastolic or resting pressure. If this increases up to 140 by 90, the person is said to have BP or blood pressure or hypertension. Now moving ahead with CAD, that is coronary artery disease. So talking about coronary artery disease, heart gets its blood supply through coronary system or coronary vessels. Whenever there is a block in these vessels, mainly because of atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is nothing but a composition of calcium, fat, cholesterol, fibrous tissue. This block is increased in case if you are fat or if you are alcoholic. So what will happen is there will be block. So blood supply to the heart will be hindered. Because of this CAD or coronary artery disease, that is nothing but a block in the coronary vessel which supplies the heart, what will happen? There will be a condition called as angina or angina pectoris. It is acute, means sudden chest pain will be there in the heart, most commonly with increasing age, because there is high chance of this block formation. There will, because of decreased oxygen to the heart muscle, there will be sudden chest pain. Next, moving with the condition that is called as heart failure or congestive cardiac failure. What will happen? The heart is not pumping enough blood to meet the body demands. That is, for example, from the aorta only it reaches the body, okay, to the all part of the body. Now since it is not pumping, means all the blood is collected here, it is not moving further. So what will happen? It gets filled here, it gets filled here, okay. It's like a pipe. If there is a block, all the blood gets collected here. So eventually blood will be stored here only, lungs. From the lungs it's not moving further. So there will be congestion. Congestion is nothing but blood stagnation. So because of that, it's called as congestive cardiac failure. That is nothing but congestion in the lungs because blood is not moving further. There will be pooling of the blood up to the lungs. Next, moving ahead with what will happen because of this CAD or the coronary artery disease. At the end stage, there will be a heart attack or myocardial infarction. Initially, there will be only pain, that is angina. At the end, there will be heart attack. So heart muscle will get finally damaged because of the decreased blood supply. At the last, you have cardiac arrest, that is heart stops suddenly beating. So heart stops beating. These are the disorders of the heart. And this is it for this video. I hope my video could make you understand the complex chapter of heart in a much easier way. If you like my video, please do like and subscribe. Thank you.